And we're very fortunate to have our first speaker, who is Dr. Nick Ramsey, who is a professor of neurosurgery and cognitive neuroscience at UMC Utrecht in the Netherlands, also professor in the Department of Social Sciences and Cognitive Neuroimaging at Utrecht University, and the co-founder and chief scientific officer of BrainCarta, a clinical fMRI program company. He is also the person behind a study you may have read about in recent years from the New England Journal of Medicine around what he's going to speak about today, which is breaking barriers, connecting brains to machines. So thank you so much for being here, Dr. Ramsey, and the floor is yours. Oh, and I think you are muted right now if you are speaking. So if you could go over to click the little microphone. You muted. You've unmuted him. Okay. And also, can you see his screen? Okay. Here, perfect. We can see your screen. And
okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think I'm online. Am I good to hear?
We can hear and see now.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
All right. So, am I to start?
Oh, yes, go ahead. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. This is the first for me to do a webinar, so I hope you will you'll forgive me if I do things wrong, but I'll go straight to the topic. I'm going to talk about brain-computer implants that we work with ALS patients and also other patients. The work is done in Utrecht in the Netherlands, the University Medical Center. And I want to start with a little movie to help you understand the kind of predicament that people undergo that we work with.
So Dr. Ramsey, there's actually no sound coming through.
Oh, okay.
I think it might be a GoToWebinar issue and not necessarily your.
Okay, no problem. So what you just saw is a woman in her 20s who is completely locked in. She could only move her eyes. And the way that she communicates is with what we call an alphabetical letter card. So it needs someone to know that she wants to say something and then go through the letters. So it's painstakingly slow. And she responds by moving her eyes up when she chooses a particular letter and her eyes down if she wants to say no. Now, that's a typical way that people with locked-in syndrome deal with in their environment. So basically, there's no muscle movement possible, so they're unable to speak. There's a minimal communication. If people can move their eyes, they might be able to use technology that tracks their eyes so that they can select items on a screen, but quite often the eye movement is not reliable enough. The important thing is cognition is really intact. So this woman also, she's completely capable of making up her own mind and what she wants to communicate. And she really has an important role in her family in raising their small kids. Now, the cause can be stroke, like a brainstem stroke, which basically disconnects all the nerves that run from the brain to the body. So you cannot reach the muscles, you can't activate them. or severe trauma, and in most cases, it's what we call motor neuron disease, like ALS. Now, many people think that life is not worth living if you're locked in, but it turns out in recent studies that most people that are locked in rate the quality of life almost as high as healthy people do. That's about 7 on a scale of 1 to 10. And the notion behind this is that if the things that you can do diminish the space of the things you can do, that in time you'll adjust to that, and that you'll fill that smaller space, which is very small for people who are locked in, with all the pleasures and the sadnesses that healthy people fill a larger space with. So people that are locked in, they do enjoy life, provided, and that's really importantly, that they have social interaction, that family is nearby, that they can communicate, and that they have a certain level of independence. Now, how can we solve this problem? How can we help out a little bit? As you notice, people using a letter card, they cannot start their own conversation. They can't take their time to form their mind. They don't have any privacy or anything that is minimal requirement for social interaction. And that's where the brain-computer interface comes in. It's a line of research that's been going on for about 35, 40 years. And only recently has huge progress been made, and I'm going to show you a little bit of that. The basic concept is that you record signals from either outside the brain, it's on the skin, on the scalp, or from underneath the skull directly on the brain. Those electrical signals are then analyzed with sophisticated mathematical programs and converted into what we call a control signal that will allow you to control a wheelchair or software. The software on a computer or a tablet is very powerful. You can open doors with it. It can be connected to all kinds of domotic devices in the home that are connected to a computer. So what do we know about human brain function that we can utilize to help people communicate directly through a computer with their brain waves? So about 200 years ago, we learned about some organization of the brain. This is phrenology. At the time, there was no way to look inside the skull, but people had the notion that different functions were located on different parts of the brain. Then in about early 1900s, people discovered the functions of different lobes of the brain, the frontal lobe, the temporal lobe. And it's only in recent decades, and especially very recently, that we're able to actually find where specific functions are located. You see the colors here on the brain. They correspond to the fingers that you see here. And they, just let me move this away. And this is possible with a very advanced MRI scanner that allows you to map which parts of the brain are responsible for moving which parts of the body. And you can see there's a great amount of detail in this small part of the brain that's coding for the fingers of the hand. That's what we call coding. Now, what do we use from the brain? This is a animation of a neuron. There's 100 billion neurons in the brain, in the human brain. And this is a close-up, and it shows you there's a lot of electricity. The light is electricity that plays in the brain. And we can see that, and if we measure electricity, it looks like this wriggly line, and we can analyze that and get a lot of information out of that about which part of the brain is active and how active it is. And that kind of information we can use to try to decode from the brain. There's two ways to go about it. As I showed you earlier, there's electrodes on the surface of the brain. This is a blow up of this part, and electrodes underneath the skull. And these, of course, require a little bit of surgery. Now, this is, of course, something that doesn't require any surgery, but it has a huge drawback, and that's the electrodes are so far away from the brain that generates the electricity that the quality of the signal is very poor. I basically compare it to a theater. You're looking at a play at the stage. If you're all the way in the back, you don't see that much detail. You just see the people moving around. So there's a poor view of what's happening. If you put the electrodes on the brain, directly on the brain, you're very close and you can see exactly what's happening on the stage. And that's the kind of signal that we want to use if we want to move towards a real brain-computer interface. So about 10 years ago at the medical center in Utrecht, we decided to build a device, an implantable device that would help people to control computer software by themselves. And rather than making it very complicated, we decided to make it extremely simple and to try to achieve making a mouse click with the brain. And I'm going to show you a few slides how that works. The basic principle is we find out first where to put it exactly on the brain. We use an MRI scanner with what we call functional MRI scan, identify the exact spot for a particular individual because those spots vary. Make a hole and put an electrode there with a wire underneath the skin. You can see the same here. And there you have a little device that amplifies the signal and transmits it wireless through the skin. So there's nothing coming through the skin. Now this project is called the UNP, or the Neuroprosthetic Device Project. So to do that, to be able to actually implant in people in locked-in state, you need to prove that it's going to work. And we've done more than 10 years of research with epilepsy patients who don't benefit from what we're working on, but they're very willing to help us out with the research because they get electrodes implanted for completely different purposes to find the source of epilepsy. And this is the kind of signal that we get from the electrodes that are placed on them. This is to show you how noisy or active the brain is. Each red dot indicates how much neural activity is underneath that particular electrode. So here you see the beginning of our story. This is Hanneke. She was our first participant. She was 58 years old at the time. Her implant was 3 years ago. She was locked in, ALS since 2008. She has care at home. She still lives at home. She has about 20 people who alternate or rotate to take care of her. She needs 24 hours per day care because she has a ventilation system, a mechanical ventilation. And as I said, we implanted in 2015. Now, this is a movie to show you in a very short time frame how the thing works. It's from the journal that published the paper. I'm assuming you can't hear the sound.
Yes, that's right. I'm not sure what it is about the sound.
That's okay. I'll explain as we're going here. So to explain that while locked in, they can sometimes use their eyes. The existing systems are not always good enough for them to make use of them. And the eye tracker often fails when you go outside. So this is our participant, Hanneke. You can see the electrodes that are implanted, and this is the software that she uses. The place of the electrodes is right here. And when she tries to move her hand, there's an increased electrical activity, and you can detect that with this little device that I already mentioned. It's an amplifier. There's a little antenna on the outside. We fix it to the t-shirt, and that goes into a tablet. It's a simple commercial tablet that interprets her brain signal and turns it into a click in specialized software. This is a game that we used and another game for her to practice using her brain signal. Now, the reason that this journal accepted this paper is because we could show that she uses it at home. So this was proof that the system works good enough at home. I'll just show you in a second how her speller works. And that was what we wanted to achieve, a system that doesn't require a bunch of technicians to make it work. And it's very simple. We simplified everything into a commercial tablet that will run all the software that will allow her to initiate communication, to write text. She can write emails, and she can also use it to alarm her caregivers when she needs help and they're not in her immediate vicinity. Now, this is how she uses the clicks to generate text. She has selected all by herself how to divide up the different letters. The trick is that she needs to make a click when the box highlights the letter that she wants to choose. Once she does that, it goes into that box and it shows all the different letters separately. Again, when she clicks the right row, it will break out the different letters, and then she can choose the right letter, and it goes one by one, basically. So it's very slow. She can make about one click by trying to move her hand, which of course doesn't help because her hand doesn't move, but we pick up the signal. And she can make one click every 4 seconds, but because of this principle of the software, she has to wait 90% of the time. So you can use, of course, things like automated word completion and things like that. Now, this is 3 years after implant. We still do some research with her about once every 2 or 3 weeks. We test out new pieces of our software. She's very satisfied. You can see her here. This is the only way that she can go outside because any other device doesn't work outside. This is the tablet that runs the software. There's a little wire, and right there is a little antenna. So it's all very small, and she can easily use it on a wheelchair. Now, she uses it to have some freedom. She likes to go outside, which she cannot do without the system. She's using it more and more in the evenings and at night because her eyes are starting to be difficult to move, which takes away the eye tracker, and she has nothing else except for this system. And it gives her a lot of peace of mind because she will always be able to draw attention when something is going on that needs assistance. So this is what we try to achieve in general. So this system is now under research. We have 2 patients implanted at this point. I shouldn't call them patients. I should call them locked-in users. And we try to achieve writing, email, which we achieved as I just showed you now, with the same system, with the tablet. If it's connected to the right hardware, she can control lights, she can switch TV channels and everything with the system. And eventually you should be able to control a wheelchair. Now in red are the things that we really would like to achieve. We'd like to be able to translate internal loud speech. So it's talking in your head, basically. That's the only way that we can read what you're trying to say. We cannot decode thoughts. And eventually moving your own limbs, where you try to move something, we decode it, and we send it to a little computer that activates the muscles in your limb. So that's the future. But we've already been doing work to try to figure out if we can decode internal loud speech. For this, we need a different device. The device we have now is very simple, it's very robust, and it's commercially available in a couple of years. But we're working on the next generation where we try to decode speech. For this, we look at a part of the brain that has a lot of space dedicated to the muscles of the face. This is what we call the homunculus. This is the surface of the brain. And you can see that the face occupies a lot of space, like the knees and the trunk, they're very small. Now, this is what we have already done. Again, we've worked with epilepsy patients to find out where we get most of the information about which phoneme of which word people are trying to say, and it's all located right here. We're making use of the fact that the muscles in the face, there's a lot of muscles in the face, and they're all activated by particular parts of the brain, and these are those particular parts of the brain. Even if you can't move, we can still detect what you're trying to say to some extent. So we tried to separate 4 different letters, P, K, U, and A, and we were able to separate those 2 to a very high degree. So now we're conducting research to go even further. For this kind of thing, you need a new device. What you see here is a pre-prototype, what we say. It will take about 5 to 10 years before it will be in the market, with miniaturized electronics, many more channels. These are all the electrodes. You can see how flexible it is on the right. And this kind of material will find the market in about 10 years. So what do we think about the technology? Now it's just a click. You can just make a click, but we're already starting research here in Utrecht and in Johns Hopkins in the United States to try to achieve point and click, where you can also control the direction of the mouse, which makes it much faster. But in the near future, we think building on this device and make a more sophisticated device, we'll be able to help amputees and people with partial paralysis And if we can decode speech, we will be able to help people with stroke and in an earlier stage of muscular disorders like ALS. So with that, I'd like to close. I thank you for your attention. And this just shows part of the team. Just for your information, it took 50 people, 50, to get the implant surgery to succeed and go well with the people that participate in this study. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ramsey. That was amazing, and really one of the earliest forays into an amazing new world. We have time for one quick question. So we have a question from the listening audience around what your thoughts would be in terms of once we start to understand, as you've been understanding, the regions of the brain that might be involved in, say, speech or clicking the finger, and whether there would ever be a way to develop technology that could connect those thoughts with some form of stimulation to muscle, bypassing a neuronal pathway and allowing someone to, say, wiggle their finger by thinking about wiggling their finger.
Yes. That's a very good question. And one of the earlier slides, I showed that we would like to be able to connect the brain directly to the muscles, basically bypassing and rewiring the spine, the spinal cord. Now, so one field in brain-computer interface is trying to decode intended movements, and it's slow, but it's moving forward. But you also need a computer that will make the correct multiple muscles contract to the right extent, and that's really a hard problem that a couple of groups are tackling to try to do that. It means that you'll have little stimulating devices in muscles or in the nerve entry to the muscle, and success has been achieved there with very basic movements. So I do believe that in due time, it will probably take decades, we will see people being able to move based on a system with these two computers, one for the brain and one for the muscles. It does, I have to say, it does depend on the health of the nerves innervating the muscles. If the nerves don't work, we have no way to make the muscles contract.
Absolutely. I think there's still an awful lot to be learned, but it's amazing, I think, how far we've come, how far you've come in recent years. So thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and we can't wait to see how it all progresses.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Ramsey.